What's up everybody, welcome back to Silicon Tech. Now we're finally getting into it, part 1 of the MacBook Pro 14-inch review. And with part 1, we're going to start off with the hardware. So everything from the form factor to the screen, the chip, the SSD, just pretty much the whole package from a hardware perspective. And with that being said, starting off with that form factor. Now, the new MacBook Pro 14-inch and the 16-inch come in a all aluminum casing. Now, this casing is kind of retro to the 2015, pre-2015 MacBook Pros that Apple's released in the past. It has, of course, a rectangular laptop form factor, but with kind of curved off edges. So the edges are rounded and it's thicker. So the whole package of the 14-inch is coming in at 3.5 pounds and 0.61 inches thick. So it's a bit of a thick laptop compared to other laptops on the market, but I think it's all worth it what you get from it. So the main part of that thickness is going to come from the actual body that houses the keyboard and the trackpad, but the screen is actually very, very thin. And speaking of the trackpad and the keyboard, these things are great. Now, this is my first Mac, but I've always heard how good the trackpad has been, and it is great. It's very big. You can do a lot of multi-touch gestures on it, just very smooth. So just navigating through the MacBook, through the screen, scrolling through websites, the different apps, and using it for video editing has definitely been a very good tool to use and give you a bit of that touch interface. Now, if you're used to an iPad like I have been for the past almost 2 years, and of course using your phone every day, you get pretty used to that touch screen. So the trackpad is a very adequate kind of, I won't say replacement, but a very good addition with the touch factor of the MacBook Pro, since it's not a touchscreen. And the keyboard is also very great, easy to use, and you'll love using it. Now, I've used the Magic Keyboard on my MacBook Pro. It's very smooth in terms of the responsiveness of the keyboard, very tactile, and it's a very good sense of use. So, you know, I like using machines that, you know, it feels good to use them. It's not a chore, but you enjoy using them. I think Apple does a very good job of that with their products. Now, altogether, the size of the 14-inch is a very good size. It makes it a very comfortable workstation, from that trackpad to the keyboard to the screen. It's a very good size for me. I have no complaints about it. I did think about the 16-inch for a little while and thought I would have some regrets getting the 14-inch, but it hasn't been the case having it for almost 2 months now. So it's large enough to do professional tasks like video editing and photo editing, and what I've thrown at it so far hasn't even been enough to kick up the fans. So I haven't heard any fan noise in my almost 2 months of having this machine, which seems crazy to me because I have a Windows laptop for work, and pretty much anything I throw at that Windows laptop causes the fans to kick up and go jet engine. And by jet engine, I mean really, really loud. You're on video calls and sometimes people can kind of make out the hum of the fan, which is crazy. But on these new MacBooks, unless you're throwing tons of things at it and a real true power user, you'll barely hear the fans. Now on to the next feature of this MacBook Pro that I think a lot of people will appreciate is the audio visual features that are in it. So of course the star of the show is the new screen. So this is the XDR Liquid Retina display, and basically it's a mini LED screen that does very well showcasing deep blacks and can get up to 600 nits of brightness when you're looking at HDR content. And seeing the HDR content or just the screen in general on YouTube or any video presentation doesn't do it justice. You have to see it in person. Seeing one of these for the first time in the Apple Store was a very big eye-opener, just seeing how crisp and smooth the screens are. So not only do you get the XDR liquid retina display, to add to the smoothness and crispness is the Pro Motion display component of it as well. So the Pro Motion display is 120 Hertz display refresh rate on the MacBook Pros. Now I have the 120 Hertz display on my iPad, so it's just very smooth scrolling through apps and playing games on it with that 120 Hertz display. And this is the same for the MacBook Pro. So a lot of people will pick that up or kind of notice it more specifically with web browsing, because of course with the iPad you do a lot of scrolling, and that's pretty much what some people pick up on that. Well, the web browsing is very smooth and crisp when you're just pushing through them, and not many hiccups with this display, especially when it's paired to the chip that we'll talk about later. Now on to the audio component of it. It features 6 high fidelity speakers. Now, what's interesting about this, specifically with the 14-inch, in the past with the MacBook Pro line, the 16-inch has always been known for superior speakers, and the 13-inch at the time was very good too. But Apple pretty much kicked up the work and made it the same amount of speakers in this MacBook Pro being the 14-inch as the 16-inch, so they didn't kind of take a step on that. Now, I'm pretty sure the 16-inch is still superior to the 14-inch just based off the bigger volume, so you're able to put bigger speakers and bigger woofers in it. But as far as I've been listening in my experience with this MacBook Pro, especially at 100% volume, it has blown my expectations out of the water. So now we get into an audio test with that MacBook Pro 14-inch.
Gold digger, if I wasn't this way, I'd rather die. Did it die? Wait. Did it die? Wait. Did it die? Whatever you want, I'll be whatever you want. Just tell me you love me or not, whatever it costs. I know I'm talking a lot, there's something I gotta get off. Don't wanna be this. I'll never know. If you can believe, I'ma let you go.
You've had a little test of the audio with that listening test, I want to kind of talk about the audio and the visual components together, and that's specifically going to be through FaceTime or any other video conferencing calls. Now, with those FaceTime or video conferencing calls, the MacBook Pro features 3 studio quality mics, and they're very good. I enjoy doing FaceTime calls and just other video conferencing calls on it. The mics are able to pick up your voice pretty well, and the camera that the MacBook Pro features is an all new to the Mac and the best camera to date on the Mac, a 1080p FaceTime camera. And to me, it's very good. It's 1080p. Of course, we're not using this camera to take pictures or anything like we're on the iPhone, but just the amount of quality that you get out of the camera compared to the software that is bundled with, you get a very clear and crisp picture, and compared to the mics, you're able to get very clear and crisp audio. So it could easily become a favorite that you'll use for those video calls. Now, the biggest surprise to me with this MacBook Pro is the battery life. Now, I started off kind of slow with using this MacBook Pro, so I'm gonna be honest with that. Like, I wasn't just going through it, video editing and just things that you would imagine to drain the battery. So even though I started off slow, like, I didn't charge this thing for the first 3 to 4 days of me using it. And that was crazy, because going back to my Windows laptop experience, you would be glad to get, you know, 3/4 of a day out of it just doing basic things, so basic office tasks and a video call every now and then. So to say that the more I've started to get in this MacBook Pro and the work case and the work uses that I'm using for it, and that battery is still holding up. So on the 14-inch you get a 70-watt battery, and that's pretty big. And to charge it, when you do have to charge it, it uses MagSafe. So now with this new MagSafe charger, this is MagSafe 3, and it's a very tough port. And when I say tough port, the main thing for MagSafe, or the main purpose for MagSafe, is to be very tough to rip out, but also easy to rip out if it's an accident. Now when the charger is pulled at an awkward angle, it comes out very easily. But if you're trying to pull it out just straight up, it can be very hard. And it's a very strong magnet. So the magnets on here are very strong, and even when I'm just trying to pull it out to take it off the charger, it can be very tough when you're not expecting it. But it charges very fast with the fast charging capabilities. So if the MacBook Pro is on about 10% and I wanted to charge to 50%, if I'm still using it, that can take anywhere from about 30 to 35 minutes. But even with that, 35 minutes, 50% battery is a very good deal to me. And even charging it to 100% still in use, like you may have another hour 30 minutes added to that. So you won't be out of the game very long. And I think that's what a lot of people like about these computers, that for one, it's not a compromise when you're on battery. You still have all of your power, and many Windows machines can't say that because they clock down the processor when they're on battery. So you'll have all of that power, and you'll have all of that power for a decent amount of time if you're throwing a lot of things at it, like video editing and other heavy, high power, intense workflows on the battery. So if we're gonna bring up the MagSafe port, we have to speak about the other ports that are on this MacBook Pro. So ports in general, that was a big surprise when Apple revealed that they were bringing them back, because Apple took them away for a couple of years on the MacBook Pros. So with the removal of the MacBook Pro's ports, many people had to get used to dongle life now. Dongles are attachments to the computer that have these ports on them. To some people, they're not anything to really complain about. They just accepted it as a way of life. But some people really do complain about it, and it's just another thing to add to their bag, another thing to lose, another thing to break, another thing that you just have to buy. So having these ports brought back to the MacBook Pro was a very welcome thing from the fan base. Now, what ports have been brought back? So we already mentioned the MagSafe 3 port, which is awesome. Then they brought back the HDMI port. Now this is the HDMI 2.0 port, and you'll be able to hook up to a 4K TV at 60 Hertz. Also, there are 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports that can go up to 40 gigabytes per second. So one of the benefits of the chip that we'll get into later is having those 3 Thunderbolt 4 port controllers. And on the MacBook Pro 14-inch with the M1 Pro processor, you can connect up to 2 external displays. So if you're using dual displays and you want to have them output through the Thunderbolt 4 ports, you can have 2 of those. And then next we have a 3.5mm headphone jack that's capable of high impedance. So you can have headphones hooked up to it with very, very high quality audio. And the most important port to me that I've been using to take advantage of is the SD card slot. Now the SD card slot is definitely going to be headache relief for a lot of creators out there. Just being able to put in those SD cards, which most people use with their cameras and just recording equipment, to either the SSD of the MacBook or external SSDs. So when I finish recording the video, now I instantly take out the SD card, put that in, hook up the SSD, and start trading and swapping files from there. And with those Thunderbolt 4 ports being capable of up to 40 gigabytes per second, if you have a very fast capable external SSD and also a very fast and capable SD card, those swapping rates or just time that you have dragging and dropping files are very fast. So I'm talking about large gigabyte files. So I'll have files that are up to like 10 gigabytes chunks of video, and they're just swapping in, you know, a couple of seconds, 30 seconds, you know, the most, going from when I was doing this on my iPad with a dongle taking, you know, up to minutes. So transferring to the slower SSD on the iPad and the USB-C port that the iPad uses being up to 10 gigabytes per second. So having that 4 times increase just on the USB-C Thunderbolt 4 ports, you can definitely see that difference in very little time, no pun intended. So we have the tangible ports on the MacBook Pro, but what about the antennas or the wireless connectivity within it? So it uses Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.0. There are better versions of these, but that's what's on it. To me, it's not really a big deal. The Wi-Fi is the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth is the Bluetooth. I mean, of course you will use the Wi-Fi to hook this computer up to the internet, which I would assume 99% of the population that's buying them have to do. And with the Bluetooth, I'm using that to hook up my AirPods to it. So with that, is nothing to really get excited about. You know, the connectivity is the connectivity, and you know, it serves its purpose. Now speaking about the SSD, the internal SSD on this is very, very fast. Now the sizes for the SSD on the base model of the both 14-inch and 16-inch version of this machine, you get 512 gigabytes. And you can go up to a whopping 8 terabytes of that internal SSD storage. And the bigger you get with the SSD, that's the faster they get. Me personally, I have the 1 terabyte SSD storage, and I think that's a sufficient amount of storage for me, or at least for my budget. And the SSD has been very, very impressive. As I mentioned, it's blazing fast reading and writing to it. So it's very, very capable. And if you are concerned about swapping with the amount of RAM that you'll choose on this machine and the SSD. So with the swapping, I barely notice it. I look at the activity monitor and it barely is swapping to the SSD, even with me using it to video edit. So I know I'm not a power user per se, and if you are using it heavily, you'll probably see more of that, but that's depending on the amount of RAM that you'll have. So speaking about that RAM, I have 16 gigabytes of RAM on this machine, and that is the least amount of RAM you can get on any MacBook Pro. Now, has that 16 gigabytes been a constraint? I'll save that more for part 2 of the software review of the MacBook Pro 14-inch. But what I can tell you about the 16 gigabytes of RAM right now is that it works very well with what it's packaged with. And what it's packaged with is the star of the show to me in this computer, and that is the M1 Pro chip. So the M1 Pro chip that is in my machine is the 10-core CPU, 16-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, 16 gigabytes unified memory of RAM, and I have no complaints about it. Super fast, Coming from the A12Z in my iPad Pro, this thing is blazing. And this chip is powering all of the new features that I mentioned before in this video, from all of the pixels on that screen, to the refresh rate on the screen, to the visual quality on the camera. Yes, it's a 1080p camera, but it's also doing a lot of computational video analysis and tricks with that chip, as well as the audio. Like, you know, when those 3 mics are taking in your voice, kind of taking out a lot of that background noise and all of that. So the little features and the magic that are in this machine are basically the products of the chip. Now, I plan to keep this machine for a couple of years, and I don't really see any challenges with the chip getting in the middle of that. Even with the updates that the machine will get, I still think it'll be able to handle it. All I want to use this machine for primarily is for the video editing, the photo editing, just powering all of the media creation that I want to do, as well as get into some other things that I haven't started doing yet with the coding and the web development. And I think this is a very good machine for that. So just on the hardware side, I don't think you can go wrong if you're, I like to call, amateur pro user in terms of getting that machine. Very comfortable machine, battery great, form factor great, screen great. Definitely going to be able to get a lot of HDR editing content out of that if that's what you want to do and you don't have an external monitor capable of that. So it's a very good hardware package for the prices that Apple are asking for. So with the spec of this machine, it comes in at $2,500. Yes, that is a lot of money, but when you put together all of those features in terms of how long this machine should last compared to Windows machines, I think you can get a lot of value out of it. So that's the hardware review of the MacBook Pro 14-inch. Thank you for joining me on this video. I had a lot of fun making it. Catch me on the next one for part 2 of the review, where we'll be going over the software component. As always, be easy and peace.